I'm going to call Stuart Nash.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. R&D tax credits and black hole expenditure were a big part of this bill, but Mr. Chair, and I will talk about those in a second, but there's one clause that I would like to talk about, which is sort of flown under the radar, but I think deserves a bit of attention, and that is actually clause 69. And what this does is it amends the available capital distribution amount, and it's actually to do with the buying and selling of livestock, and around the capital gains and capital losses associated with the buying and selling of livestock. But the interesting thing about this clause, Mr. Chair, is it actually comes into force on the 28th of March 2012. Now, as we know, there are a number of pieces of tax legislation that are retrospective for a number of very good reasons. And we accept that, even though one of the underlying principles of tax legislation is that it's not ideal to have retrospective legislation because people have tended to make decisions based on the current law, and as they should. But this has eluded my attention, I must admit, and maybe I was a bit remiss at Select Committee when I looked at this, but I'm not too sure why we've got a piece of legislation that is actually retrospective back for about will end up being about 3.5 to 4 years. That is a long time, and I'm assuming there is a reason behind this, and whether that is case law, and I suspect it must be. I'm assuming what happened is a farmer went to court because he or she was very dissatisfied with the outcome of a decision the tax department had given, was taken to court, the court made a decision, and that decision has to be ratified through legislation, and that's why it has gone back to 2012. But it is rather unusual. I must admit, in my short time in this House and the 2 times I've had, including a time as Labor's revenue spokesperson, I haven't come across a piece of legislation which actually is that retrospective. And I wonder if it has any implications for for farmers or Queen Street farmers and the dealings they have had in the over those last 4 years, or if there are going to be any unintended consequences. I suspect there's not, but it is just worth noting that that is reasonably retrospective. And I wonder if actually the chair of the Select Committee, David Bennett, has anything to say on that, considering he must have bought and sold quite a lot of stock over the last 4 years. Mr. Speaker, what I would like to talk about, and this came up a lot in discussion, including in submissions, is the eligibility of the R&D credit. And as mentioned, we talked long and hard about this. We thought, we do on this side believe that we do need a regime for rewarding research and development. The last speaker from New Zealand First talked about New Zealand's R&D spend at 1.5% of GDP. Mr. Speaker, I suspect it's actually a lot higher than that. The reason I say that, in this country you have got to capitalise R&D, where I believe if we change the law, and this bill doesn't do that, that allow people to expense R&D, then in fact I think you'd find it went through the roof. I suspect at the moment there's a lot of R&D undertaken which is not accounted as research and development but is expensed in some way, shape or form. But that's a point for another day. So I want to talk about MX2, and this is the corporate eligibility criteria. So in the Select Committee, what we really were keen to ensure is that only New Zealand companies took advantage of this, because the purpose of this is to grow New Zealand companies to the point where they can take on the world, but certainly there's a recognition that early stage companies are often the ones who are the shortest of cash or suffer cash flow crises, but they're also the ones that are spending a lot of money on research and development. So what we didn't want to do, or what we wanted to ensure, was that there was a big corporate didn't set up in New Zealand simply for the purpose of leveraging off this R&D tax credit. So this is MX2. So we had a definition of corporate eligibility criteria, and excuse me, but I'm just going to read this out because I do think it's quite important just to clarify what we're talking about eligibility. The first point is that the person is a company that is resident in New Zealand, and there is no double tax agreement under which, for the purpose of this, a person is treated as a resident of a foreign country or territory, which comes back to the point I was making. We didn't want a large corporate to set up a subsidiary here with a view to claiming this R&D tax credit. The third point, and this is an and, so it's not an or, is the person is a member of a group of companies, and the group does not include a company that is not resident in New Zealand. And we talked quite a lot about this and determined at what level we should take this, because there was an agreement that, in fact, what happens with a lot of these early stage companies is they set up offshore marketing or sales forces. Mr. Chair, thank you very much. They set up offshore sales forces or incorporate small companies to actually commercialise this R&D or sell the R&D in another country. So we needed to make sure that we allowed that, but however avoided the circumstance I was talking about before. We also said that the company cannot be a company that is treated under, for the purposes of a tax double agreement, a resident of a foreign territory. And of course the person is not a special corporate entity, the person is not a qualifying company, and there are a number of other provisions. I suppose what we wanted to do is, when I say we, I'm talking about the Select Committee here, Mr. Chair, is we wanted to make sure that we set up a regime that was easy to implement, because we talked about the cost of setting this up, and we didn't want a regime where the cost of setting it up was actually greater than the benefit received, which would have defeated the whole purpose, obviously. But it needed to be easy to access, it needed to be a certain amount, enough money, so it was worthwhile, but the costs and the compliance needed to be such that the benefit created was way above that. There were thresholds on this. For a person, for example, I think, if I'm right in saying this, Mr. Bennett might be able to correct me on this. My memory serves me, you can only collect $500,000 per year up to a total of $2 million. So again, we're talking about really the SME sector. If we say the SME sector is defined by 19 employees or less, there may be some companies that go above that, Mr. Chair, but by and large, we're talking about small growth companies, but up to a maximum of $2 million. What the Commissioner can do, and this is MX5, is the Commissioner can, must actually extinguish a person's tax loss for the tax year to the extent of the amount given by dividing the amount of the tax credit for R&D tax losses for the tax year by 0.28. So we're using the corporate tax rate on that. There are a number of other, there are actually a lot of clauses that talk about how this is going to be administered, how much is available, but I think I'll let my other colleagues talk about this. But I just do want to say that we do believe there does need to be an R&D regime in place implemented by the RRD, but we just think it could have gone a whole lot further. Thank you very much.
The Honourable David Parker.
Thank you, Mr.